Right, hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Shirt check, we've got just a Levis white one today, nothing special. But today we're starting a series of lectures that I'm really excited for. So we've got the endocrine system. So we're just going to be looking at the hypothalamus and pituitary today and just go over the basics. And then we're just going to go through the different hormones in the lectures. Obviously we're not going to go through all of them, but we'll go through the main ones which help with body regulation. So if we first talk about hormones, what they are. So they're chemical messengers secreted by endocrine glands, and glands can be either exocrine or endocrine. And there are different ways of hormones acting on cells depending on the structure, so either they're steroid or non-steroid. And generally pre-hormones signal to release hormones, so we've got this control so we don't release too much hormone. So what are the two types? We've got steroids, so lipid derived, and a non-steroid, so non-lipid derived. So the first one, kind of some examples, we've got kidneys, we've got calcitriol, adrenal cortex, we've got androgens, minerals, and glucocorticoids, gonads, and echinosynoids. So we're going to go through some of them in the following lectures. We've got non-steroids, so proteins and amino acid derived, so such as ADH, oxytocin, stuff like that. The main difference is that these non-steroid, they can't cross the lipid bilayer because they're non-lipid derived and they don't have that polarity, so therefore they attach to receptors and cell surfaces, and then the whole cascade starts inside the cell. Whereas the steroid ones, they can cross easily the cells, and then they get into the nucleus, cause the formation of new proteins which regulate the cell. So we've got kind of the main ones here. So we're going to go through the hypothalamus, pituitary, we're going to look at the thymus, ovaries, testes, the adrenal, and the thyroid and parathyroid. So let's talk about the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So in the hypothalamus, you've got a supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei, and the blood supplied to the hypothalamus is via the hypophyseal artery. Then we've got this connection between the hypothalamus and pituitary, which is sometimes called hypophysis, via this hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. So the pituitary gland, or as we said, hypophysis, is split into these two main parts. We've got the anterior, which is the adenohypophysis, which releases most of the hormones we're going to talk about. And then we've got the posterior, which is the neurohypophysis, which releases some of them. It releases less hormones, but it's still as important. So it releases stuff like oxytocin and vasopressin. So the action to move these vesicles of hormones requires ATP, and these vesicles of hormones and pre-hormones, and this is why the brain has one of the highest energy consumptions, because we're obviously constantly needing those hormones to be regulated. So generally the body has these feedback loops when we have too much of a hormone being made. So we've got these short loops, which basically the hormone inhibits the gland that produces it, or these long loops where the hormone either negatively or positively feedbacks to the hypothalamus and causes either increase or decrease in the hormone. So we've got these three types of cells. In the pituitary, so we've got these acidophils, basophils, and chromophobes. Somatotropes, so if we break that down, soma means kind of the body. So as in our neural cells, we've got the soma, that means the body. And tropes, so trophic meaning to grow, such as in plants we've got phototrophic, so grow towards the light. Somatotropes release somatropin, which is the growth hormone, and that either works by they target the liver, and they're often bound to this growth hormone binding protein in the blood to be transported. We also have lactotropes, who release prolactin, and that's controlled by dopamine. So high dopamine means less prolactin. Moving on to basophils, we've got corticotropes. They really, firstly the hypothalamus will make this POMC, which breaks down to ACTH, and that's in the hypothalamic pituitary axes. So these are the breakdown of the axes in the brain. And they kind of act on the adrenal gland, and we'll talk about those hormones there and how this ACTH is used. Then thyrotropes, so again we're using those base words, thyro, so to do with the thyroid gland. So we've got thyroid stimulating hormone released from the pituitary, and that's in the hypothalamic pituitary kind of thyroid axes, and then again trophic to the thyroid. Gonadotropes, so gonads, to do with our sexual organs, so we've got this FSH and LH release. Then we've got chromophobes, which are seen to be kind of in between or the leftovers of some of these cells when they've done their function. So they're kind of intermediates. So if we talk about the overall, so as we go through the lectures, you'll see there's a little bit of a pattern. So we've got the hypothalamus, which releases these trophic hormones, which are releasing hormones. So in the hypothalamus, you will hear stuff like thyroid releasing hormone, and then the pituitary will release thyroid stimulating hormone, which will travel to the thyroid and release thyroid hormone. So we've got this three-step, tightly regulated. And then when we talk about disorders, they can either be primary, so to do with the thyroid, for example, secondary to do with the pituitary, and tertiary to do with the hypothalamus. So the ways of communicating with these hormones, we've got this direct gap junctions or paracrine effect, so coordination of tissue function at local level, say nearby, or endocrine coordination of function of target tissue somewhere else. Or we've got synaptic through the nervous system on neurotransmitters. So the hormone action, so again, as I talked about, depending on either if the hormone is steroid or non-steroid, we've got this activation of genes in steroid hormones to synthesize enzymes and proteins, which then upregulate the control of protein synthesis. Or we've got this activation or inactivation by changing protein 3D structure. So as we talked about here, this is the kind of feedback control. So we've got this hypothalamus, which releases releasing hormones, then the pituitary releasing trophic hormones, and then the target organ, such as the thyroid, which releases the actual hormone. And again, this hormone can have a negative feedback as well as the physiological effect. And we can have this long feedback loop here, which is either positive or negative. So a positive will be something like oxytocin whilst giving birth, which contracts the uterus until the baby's born. So we have this positive feedback, so more oxytocin keeps flowing in. But then when the baby's born, we have got this negative, it turns into negative feedback to stop the hormone being released, because the woman doesn't need it anymore. So yes, that was a quick summary of the endocrine system. Yeah, so look in the description for the links if you're interested in buying some of the books, especially. So this clinical chemistry, this is more to do with kind of case studies and diseases, whereas this metabolic metabolism is more to do with the biochemistry and how things work. So yeah, this is how things work, and then the other ones for when things go wrong. And then we've got that Essentials Nutrition's book, which basically talks about what you can eat to make yourself feel better, which is amazing. So yeah, look in the description for that, and also there are free trials on Amazon if you're interested in that. And yeah, thank you, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video where we start talking about some of these hormones.